Mares eat oats and does eat oats and little lambs eat ivy, a kit'll eat ivy too, wouldn't you? Mares eat eels and snails eat eels, and little lambs eat oysters, a squid'll eat oysters too, wouldn't you? And I don't know the rest of the song. Welcome to the show, folks. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to or watching the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. But wait, back that up. We're not on Odyssey tonight. Tonight, we are playing a rebroadcast on Odyssey Radio. And for reasons you all know, we're down here broadcasting from the Makeshift studio. And so, YouTube.com, up the show on my phone so I can see when the internet is going up and down like it just did. So I keep this playing in the background here so I can see what's going on. And I know when to shut up because the internet is going up and down tonight, as usual. I did have a talk yesterday with them about the internet, the campground here, and they're going to look into what they can do to boost that signal a little bit or upgrade it a bit. So there you go. So I want to welcome you to the Intrepid radio program. I got to tell you, and I was sitting here with Sam. Have any of you seen the series Outlander? It's on Stars. You have to subscribe to Stars to see it. But Outlander, it's going into its 7th season. And it's, do you know about that? Do you know about the books by Diane Gabaldon, I think? Gabaldon? And those books came out 20 years ago or something like that. And it's about a woman in the 1940s who she and her husband happily married. He's a professor of archaeology, and she's a doctor, a physician. And she ends up, this is the mystical side of the series. They're looking at an old circle of standing stones on the top of this hill, surrounded by oak trees, and they watched from the bushes late one night and saw a ritual being done there, and and it was very beautifully done, beautifully filmed. And she goes back to the stones the next day to pick some of the flowers that were there, and as she's there, she somehow passes through one of the stones and ends up 200 years in her past. And they're in Scotland near Inverness. And it's the whole series so far. We're still in the first season, Sam and I. I've seen it all up through to the end of the 6th season, but we're watching it. And there was a wedding tonight between the two main characters, Jamie Fraser and Claire Beecham. And I'm sitting here, I'm getting misty-eyed. I think, what the hell is that? Why am I crying at this? She had this gorgeous dress. He's dressed in his kilt and his sword. You know, they're Scots. And by the way, the history is so well done from an historical standpoint. If you're into the history of that time, yeah, it's going to absolutely thrill you and enthrall you. It's riveting. And of course, there is big conflict between the Scots and the Brits that's going on. This is the lead up to the Battle of Culloden Moor, is the era that she's in. And she's in 1743. Culloden Moor took place in 1746. And do you all remember? Here's a little history lesson. Do you remember what happened at the Battle of Culloden Moor? So, yeah, Doug, don't even start down that road. I got places I could go. There is no estrogen in my body. So, so anyway, it's in 1746. It was the British Army went in to wipe out the clan system, basically. A lot of politics there, a lot of things to talk about, a lot of details I'm not giving, just for the sake of telling you what happened at Culloden Moor. Culloden Moor, you can visit it today. It's outside Inverness, Scotland. Inverness, famous for the city that's at the mouth of Loch Ness. And so the clans are fighting the British. There's big conflict working up to that. And they clash at Culloden Moor, all the clans against the greatest army of its day, the British Army, worldwide. And when they clashed in 1746, the outcome was that the clan system in Scotland was done away with forever. They were thoroughly defeated, the Scots were. And Bonnie Prince Charlie, this if you've ever heard his name thrown about, they called him the Great Pretender. He was actually the guy, he was a Stuart. He had the right to the Scottish throne. And he believed he had even more right to take the English throne, as Mary Queen of Scots did a couple of centuries earlier. And so this is what the war was all about. And what's interesting is that England's army, led by Lord Cumberland, was all the way up in Scotland looking for the army of Bonnie Prince Charlie. What they didn't know was Bonnie Prince Charlie was all the way down south. They came within a mile of the gates of London, and there was no standing army there to protect London. They could have raided London and taken it, but they didn't, because word was they had no idea. They thought Cumberland's army was there, so they turned around and they marched back to Inverness. When they got there, of course, Cumberland met them there on the battlefield, and Mary Queen of Scots got her head chopped off. She did, a couple hundred years earlier, and after being held for 20 years as a house prisoner under the orders of her cousin Elizabeth I of England. And so Bonnie Prince Charlie escapes. He goes back to Italy, where he lives a very obscure life until he dies. And probably not penniless, but not rich anymore. And he dies in obscurity. And the clan system is abolished forever in 1746. And then they had the Highland clearances after that, where they cleared all the Highlanders out of the Highlands, drove them down into the lowlands. There were laws against wearing the kilt, against having your own form of clan governance, of speaking Scots Gaelic. You could be hung on the road by a British soldier if you were seen wearing a kilt or speaking the language, playing the bagpipes even. And so the king, after a couple of years, said, this won't do. He said, that's a lot of waste of manhood. Let's offer the Scots a way that they can keep a form of their clan governance by inviting them to take on roles as regimental leaders. And hence was the birth of the Scots regiments. And one of the regiments that the reenacting we do were the British Redcoats, but we're Scots. We have the Black Watch kilt, and we represent 1750s when we did this. And the Black Watch kilt, the Black Watch is still in existence today. It's the 42nd Royal Highland Regiment. And so that's what we portrayed when we were doing they got the royal writ when just before the Battle of Fort Carillon, which is Fort Ticonderoga in upstate New York. And they, right about that same time period, they replaced the buff facings that were on their cuffs and on their collars. They had to take that off and put on the royal blue facings, showing that they were a royal regiment. So that's what took place. So this is the era in which this TV show takes place. And the attention to detail, historical detail, is stunning. And so you'd really enjoy it. For those of you joining me right now, of course, I'm just making mention of Sam and I have been sitting and watching Outlander. If any of you have seen that or have read the books, Rainey and I watched the whole series. It's up to the the 7th season is going to launch pretty soon. And Rainey and I have seen them all, and except for Sam is not. And so I'm sitting and rewatching it with him and catching details I missed before. The Black Watch slept at your house, Johan? You got so many signatures. That's fantastic. How cool is that? So yes, we portray the Black Watch. And if you go over to my Facebook page, go into my photos, and then click on albums, and you scroll down, you'll see a couple of different albums that are dedicated to the 42nd Royal Highlanders, or the Highland Regiment, I think I called it, or the regiment. You'll even see Sam. We had Sam out a couple of those years with the regiment, and he was about 10 years old. And we put him in the white shirt, the 1700s shirt, and a red waistcoat. It was one of my old uniform red waistcoats. And so he put that on, and it hung very long on him, but he had that on. And we had my old bonnet, the blue bonnet. And we didn't have a red coat made for him because it's pretty work intensive. But we gave him a great kilt, which is the kilt, the Black Watch kilt. Do you know how they put those on back in the day? You still put them on that way today. They would throw the whole 9 yards out on the ground, spread it out, and it was basically twice the width of the fabric as it's laying on the ground, from about your knees, and it would come up to about your face. And you would lay down on that about midsection. And before you laid down, you had to take the fabric on the ground and fold in pleats. You pleated that all up to be able to bunch it up so you didn't have all that extra fabric. That's why there's pleats in the back of the kilt. And then you lay down on it, you slide your belt under it, and you flop one side over, and you belt it up, and you stand up, and you got all this fabric from your waist hanging out. Then you find the right points in it, and you tie a knot, throw it over your shoulder, and so you got the mantle across the shoulder, the bundling in the back. You can work it so you can grab between your legs the middle of the hanging fabric, and you bring it up over your back and up over your head, and then you take the two ends and tie them together, throw those over your neck, and you've got a hooded garment, and you can pull down sleeves to cover yourself. So it's a very versatile garment. So you'll enjoy watching this series because you'll see a lot of this stuff going on in the series. So, but you'll see pictures of Sam in his great kilt if you go over there and take a peek. So, hey, I want to say hey to everybody. Doug Stack, good to see you, brother. Siani Reese, good to see you. Yes, kilts are sexy as hell. And of course, Sam always remembers that when we wore kilts at the Renaissance Festival, we'd have like Scottish Weekend or something like that. And of course, we had all kinds of quips and from the crowd and everything. And, it would be patrons, women would come up to us and go, "Tee-hee, what does a real Scotsman wear beneath his kilt?" Well, Sam's favorite answer of all the answers we would come up with for street entertainment was, well, it depends on what, no, people would say, "Why are you wearing a skirt?" And I'd say, "It's not a skirt. Skirts are for women. Kilts are for men. If I was wearing a skirt, I'd have to be wearing the right color heels with it." And women would say, "Tee-hee, hey, what do you wear under your kilt?" And I'd say, "Why, my socks and shoes, of course." And what are you wearing under your kilt? "Why, depends on what color lipstick you're wearing, lass." And so all of those answers were things that we came up with in the day. And Steph says, "Cuervo Queen, Scotty, you might like Men in Kilts too. It's also on Stars. Sam Hugan is also in it." I did not know that. Men in Kilts. Oh, wait, yes, I do. I wasn't clicking with the title. I've been watching that. It's the guy who plays Jamie and the guy who plays Dougal are in that. And I don't remember both the actors' names. Sam Hugan is in it, and the other guy. And that's really good. Good to see you too, Teresa. Thank you. Steph says, "What if I don't wear lipstick?" Well, we had other answers too. Steph, you're going to force me to be naughty in my joke delivery. So, no, you're not too short for a kilt, Doug. You gotta hang it right. That's all. Robert V, good to see you. There's a story about the Scott that one with the blue ribbon. You think I haven't heard that one a million times? No, no offense. It's a great story, uh, um, uh, uh, Robert, but it's I have heard that a million times. I plugged Scotty on Men in Kilts. Thank you, Delaney Pearl. And Ryan Gale, how are you doing? Ryan, those were the best of times. I remember, guys, you should hear. I remember when Ryan first came, he was learning how to teach himself. I don't know if you, Ryan, would correct me and say you were trying to learn violin, but fiddle, because he was playing the kind of Celtic music and trying to do that for the regiment. And he was rough at first because he was learning, and he got so good. The last I remember hearing him playing, it was amazing. Ryan, did you not build your own violin? I can't remember. Or was it you gave me one of your old ones and I had all the pieces and I still have that. It's mounted on my wall, unfinished. So, but Ryan Gale was part of our regiment in those days. We started that regiment in 1998. Yeah, you gave me an old one. That's it. And so, Teresa, what were you red faced at the whole time? Hey, and Siani, thank you, by the way. I love wearing my kilt. My son and I were just looking at, just today, before all this even, we were looking at utilikilts for working down here, because the utilikilts now, and you've all seen them in one form or another, made out of very sturdy fabrics, and they got the big pockets, and they've got, instead of the sporan hanging on the front, they've got a design with the buttons and a big pouch that's built into the kilt, and they have them for construction workers that can wear those, and they're pretty darn cool. And so we were looking at, my son wants to get one of those, and I might even get another one of those. So there's nothing like being around a bunch of construction workers and coming in with your kilt on. So we just say, it's not a kilt, it's not a skirt, it's a kilt. And so, you know why? Because I killed the last man who called it a skirt. Now that's as old as all the other jokes too. So you'll get laughed at out of Lake Charles, says Doug Stack. Yeah, watch them laugh at me. You just watch them laugh. And I don't care. I'm secure enough in my masculinity to wear my kilt. And when we had the regiment, Ryan, you can attest to this. We had Eric Nelson. We had me. Who else did we have? We had a ton of big guys in the regiment, and we were wearing kilts all the time. And I've worn kilts to parties. I got invited right after my divorce from my ex-wife. This is 20 years ago now. I got invited to go partying with clubbing with the younger set out at the festival, and so I went clubbing, and they're all dressed up in their clubbing, dancing, drinking clothes. I wore my kilt and my big Scottish weave sweater. You might call it a fisherman's sweater. And I went out in that with my big boots and my rolled down socks. And so yeah, we were big guys. We were big guys. Go look at the regimental pictures. You'll see some of us. We were up at Fort Ticonderoga. We had some fat guys. We had some big guys. We had Tim Matthews, a friend of mine, who's 6'7", big man, and you should see him in a red coat and a kilt, wearing a sword. And so let's see, what else we got? Let me look back at some. Who else is here? We got Elder Barry. Good to see you, Elder Barry. Oh, Johan Dancing Gypsy, you went to school in Toonheid, Glasgow. You lived in the tenements. I've got a good friend of this show, and a friend of mine from when I was with TAP's Para magazine, Heather White. She's the one who did that drawing of me and did a drawing of Rainey just a couple of weeks ago. and put them on my Facebook. She's been a friend of mine. She lives in Glasgow. Sometimes I see some of the messages she types on Facebook, and I go, wow, I almost don't understand that. It's Glasgowian, you das Kunt. There, I said it with an accent, so some people wouldn't have caught that. So Mark Dice just came out with another doozy. What did Mark Dice do? Doug. Let's see. I dance the sword dance. It's my favorite. And so I've danced the sword dance. I'm not very good at it, but I try. Danced a lot of dances, though, in my kilt. We had our good days, good times. And Ryan, I remember Ryan Gale, who's here in the chat room. I think the first time you came to an event, wasn't it to Big Island, the Big Island Park event in Minnesota? And that's where they set up a whole era of history. And they do the crafters are there and shows and teachers and people putting on demonstrations, all kind of 17th century, 18th century type of stuff, a little bit of early 19th century. And we would stay in costume the whole time. You're not there and you get out of your costume after hours and you're in civilian clothes. You're in your costume the whole time. Everybody's living the era. And we had our little encampment set up with all our tents. And we'd build a big fire and we'd drink and tell stories and sing around the fire. And we would sing sea shanties a lot of times. So we had a good time. One of Sam's favorite songs from the regiment. We used to sing like songs like this. It would be, oh, the year was 1778. How I wish I was in Sherbrooke now. A letter of marque came from the king to the scummiest vessel I'd ever seen. And the chorus says, God damn them all. I was told we'd cruise the seas for American gold. We'd fire no guns, shed no tears. Now I'm a broken man on a Halifax pier, the last of Barrett's privateers. It tells the whole story of Barrett's privateers. And so we'd sing songs like that. We'd sing all kinds of other songs. They were great. Lots of sea shanty type of stuff. So it was fun. And one night it snowed. I remember that. Ryan, were you there when it snowed? We had about an inch of snow fall on the ground because these events were always the first weekend in October. And we had a little bit of snow on the ground. We got up out of our little canvas troop tents, sleeping on the ground or sleeping on a rope tension bed, 18th century rope tension bed. And we got up when it was snowing and we took out our lanterns. And we lit all our lanterns with candles and we walked around the whole village there, the historical village, singing Christmas carols. That was great fun. And we had a snowball fight. So lots of fun on those events. It was a family thing. My daughters grew up with that. They grew up with the festival. Sam used to come to some of the regimental events with me when he was younger. He was just saying tonight, I would love to get back into that. So we're going to see if maybe one of these days we can get him like I have, the replica Pedersoli Brown Bess musket that dates back to the era. So there you go, Doug. That's for the Brian Barnett Soul Tribe card decks only. Okay. Not sure what that is. So, but that's cool. Whatever you got. And let's see, who else is here? Steve Clark is here. Howdy, brother. Good to see you. And Siani, I think I said hi to you a little bit early. And let's see. You know, did I ever tell you all the story about when we went as the regiment back in 2001? We went up to Fort Ticonderoga, New York from Minnesota. And we joined a big reenactment that was going on at Fort Ticonderoga. Because it was the second battle of Fort Ticonderoga, or was it the first? Ryan, refresh my memory. Where the Highlanders, the 42nd Royal Highlanders, were decimated there because they kept storming the wall. The French had the fort, and it was Fort Carillon at that time. And the the Scots were storming the fort. Meanwhile, the generals, Abercrombie and a couple of others, they took off. And the Scots never got the order to withdraw, and so they didn't. The Scots did not withdraw, and they kept storming. 1758 is when that took place. And the Scots stormed the wall. The French had cleared out for about a half a mile from the fort every tree. They built these big ramparts and barricades, and think of fort walls, and that's what they built. And so the Scots were storming the wall at one point. There were trenches dug around the fort and ramparts, earthen ramparts, and then the wall. And they would storm, and I think I heard that there were about 1,200 of them killed that day, storming those walls of Fort Carillon, now Fort Ticonderoga. And so when we were at the park and we set up our encampment, we were told that we couldn't dig in the ground. We couldn't dig grounds for fire pits or anything because it's all kind of sacred ground now. So many men died there. There were men buried in common graves. It was Lord Montcalm of the French who buried all the Scots and all the French together from the battlefield in one big common grave. And he erected a big red cross over it. And he got some heat from his other officers who said, "You can't bury the French with the Scots or the British." And he said, "They're all fallen, and we honor them all." I don't remember. There was a famous quote he said that was brought back out of that. And so they have a replica of that big red cross today, about the spot where they thought that was erected. And when we got there, it was later in the day, and we were all in our uniforms. They weren't costumes, mind you, they're uniforms. And one thing we noticed right away is that all the old earthen ramparts that the French dug around the fort, they're all still there. It's in a park now, and it just looks like mounds that are grassy mounds now, but they run off into the woods. And the trees, you got your 50 to 70 foot tall pine trees out there, this whole thick forest. And before you even get to the fort, there's these ramparts that run off into the woods. And the rampart comes to a corner, almost a corner in the woods, and it goes downhill to the lake. And so to Lake George. And, or is it Lake Huron there? Where it's right on the spit. It's a spit of land that sticks out where the lake pinches together and forms the two lakes. And so there we are. We're walking along the ramparts. And well, before we did that, we stopped all in uniform. We'd had the wife of one of our guys died en route. She was not with us, and he didn't come with us because she was getting some cancer treatment for leukemia. And she was even going into remission. She still had some treatments. And finally, the treatments just took over and it killed her. And we got that news when we were about halfway to New York with the trucks and hauling all our gear. And we stopped and we cracked open a bottle of single malt scotch. And we drank a toast to her on the road at a wayside rest. And Bonnie, and she was married to our friend Steve, who was another big guy that was part of the regiment. And so we got there, and there was a cairn that was erected a couple of decades ago. It's 2 decades since I was there, so before that, a cairn commemorating the 42nd Royal Highlanders and the fallen there. And so we drank a toast there with there was another group there portraying the 42nd Royal Highlanders as well. And we joined together. We drank toasts and toasts to our own fallen comrades. There was, and Bonnie was very fresh on our minds. And of course, the leader of our group, even before we became the regiment, he was part of the planning of the regiment. He was in Army intelligence, Sean Gaffney, and he had been run over in a parking lot by somebody deliberately. And many people didn't know this at the time, but it was because he was gay. He had survived all these actions, survived being overseas, and he's home just getting ready to retire out, and somebody ran him over deliberately in a parking lot with their truck. And so he died. And so we remembered him. We remembered to all those who have gone on before you. And so we drank a toast to them. And so we followed, after that, we followed the ramparts out into the woods. And by now it's 10:30 at night. And you know how it's dark when there's no lights anywhere? And you can see, but barely. Everything's kind of gray out there. You could see the trees, but it was so gray, you couldn't make out a lot of details. And we're standing on this corner of the ramparts where it goes down to the lake. And while we're standing there, we had our bagpiper play Amazing Grace. And we quoted the Soldier's Prayer. I believe it was Eric Nelson, my friend, who quoted the Soldier's Prayer out to what they refer to as the killing fields off of this rampart, just down in the woods, right down in there where there's all trees grown up now. And what I started to say, they don't let you dig anything there. They don't even want you to put a spoon in the dirt in case you might hit something that's still there. So we're out in this thick woods. It's hot. It's very humid. It's July in upstate New York. And we're playing the bagpipes and quoted the Soldier's Prayer. And we stood in silence. We're going to give a moment of silence. We stood in silence with our hats off, and we're facing the woods, standing along the ramparts. And all of a sudden, you can think whatever you want of this. Out in the trees, Ryan, were you there? Were you there in 2001? Yeah, we got chewed up by the descendants of the 1758 mosquitoes. Yeah, you were there. Do you remember how out in the woods, all of a sudden, fireflies, after we said the Soldier's Prayer and played, they all started rising, just en masse, and they came toward us and started flying around us. Back in the day, they would call that the will-o-wisp. And what struck me and many of the guys there, and Ryan, I don't know if this struck you the same way, on a spiritual level, this really took a lot of us by surprise. What we felt at the time, you can scientifically disprove it if you want to. You can say, oh, they're just bugs that were flying around you. But there we are standing on the ramparts in front of the field where the Scots, 1,200 of them at least, met their death that one afternoon. And we offer up a prayer and play Amazing Grace on the bagpipes, and we're dressed in our uniforms, which are as close historical replicas in clothing as you could get to the uniform. And the will-o-wisp came up and rose up. If you know will-o-wisp and you understand the mythology behind that, it's the spirits of the fallen, the spirits of the dead. And so here we are, after all of that, at 10:30 at night, the will-o-wisp come up. And it was, the feeling there was palpable. And so we slowly, very quietly, we walked back along the rampart out of the woods and to where the big replica of the Red Cross is put up, where Montcalm buried all the soldiers. And we're standing there, and we did the same thing. We offered up a prayer, and then out of the woods come the will-o-wisp and surround us by the cross. And it was very real for a lot of people there that day. And so I'm going to ask Ryan in the chat room how he felt about it. And so it was I think, call me nuts, but I felt it was the spirits of those fallen that were doing us honor because we did them honor. So no way to prove that, but that was the feel in the air that night. So I'm not following the chat room. I don't know what all is going on over there, guys, but I see Field Guy mentioning the weather. We're supposed to have a couple of days of rain here, hard rain. I was sitting in here about an hour ago, and the whole trailer is rocking like this from the wind. So it's very interesting. But thank you, Doug. I wear that with pride, laddie. So let's see what else we got here. I'm just looking at the make you feel very comfortable, Doug. Have a good time. That's good, guys. So, Field Guys, somebody says Matt Finn here? I don't think I've seen Master Finn tonight. And that's okay. Sometimes we got other things to do. So, I'm just going back through the chat room. And believe it or not, I do have a topic for tonight that has nothing to do with that story. I was just led to tell that story. You know, it's on my head. I'm not going to save it for tomorrow because I'll forget. So, there's something I wanted to bring up. You know how we had the cards that I would do, or the matchsticks that I would do. And I wanted to ask this question before I got the topic tonight is all about, I wanted to talk about human beings can be really crazy makers. And there's the effort to drive the other person crazy. It's kind of this review of psychoanalytic work on how we do what we do to each other. And I wanted to get into that, but segueing off of Fort Ticonderoga and Will-O-Wisp and Scott's history, I have to ask you the question. This was the question I was going to open with tonight was, is an idle mind really the devil's workshop? Now they say an idle mind is the devil's workshop. So you have to, I'm going to suggest making a to be list, to be or not to be. Make a to be list to offset your to do list. Now, if someone suggested that an idle mind is a good thing, I imagine you might scratch your head, you might roll your eyes, you might look at your to-do list. And if you're like many other people, the old myth, an idle mind is the devil's workshop, still lingers somewhere in the back of your head, whether you believe in the devil or not. You get the idea of what they mean by that. But research from Harvard and other institutions of higher learning has shown that idle moments of mindlessness, idle moments of mindfulness, without imperatives, nothing to rush to, fix or accomplish, actually add to your mental and physical well-being and health. Greater productivity, better memory, stronger immune systems, fewer health problems, greater happiness, and longer life. That's if you are mindful of having no imperatives at the moment, having idle moments. So the idea is don't just do something, sit there. Now, this is going to go against all the go-getters that are out there. I've always considered myself a rather type A type of person. Not the asshole-ish type, though. I like to get things done. I have things on my list. But I had to learn to stop. I'm going to tell you something, and many of you know my personal story, my personal junk. Some of you don't. But there are things. When I was a small boy, and many of you know this, I was sexually abused. And I never lost the memory of that. I grew up with it. It was just another memory when I was a kid. And it wasn't until, and it was repeated, by the way, but it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I realized how that had affected me, how it had set my modes of operation. the way I view things, the way I act. I sometimes wonder if I'd be a completely different person if I had never gone through that as a kid, because it implanted things, it set creases in your brain. Um, and when that happens, I once had a counselor ask me, "Why don't you ever slow down? Scotty, what keeps you moving? Why are you always doing something?" Because in a counseling session, I was talking about all the stuff that's going on, all the things I'm engaged in, and this and that. And I was rather proud of the things I do and how many things I do. And this was before even my daughters were born. This is way back. This is almost 30 years ago, or it was just after they were born. And so, in talking about this, she said, "Do you know why you never stop?" She said, "I have a theory." She said, "People who are constantly moving and never stop and have abuse in their background," she said, "that is the mode of operation they have learned to not let the past catch up with them. You keep moving, you keep busy, so you don't have to stop and think and have idle moments." Hey, Mary Wins, good to see you. Distraction, Michelle Canham Free, exactly. Hey, Michelle, good to have you here. And so this is what this is fighting against. It's okay. See, I was so busy that I didn't take time to think. I didn't take time for idleness. So don't just do something. Sit there. Is the mandate I'm going to throw to you. Sit there and do nothing? Yeah, sit there and do nothing. I can imagine, rolling your eyes. You glance at your to-do list, your workload, booing and hissing at the idea of sitting still. You're up to your eyeballs in tasks, in deadlines. You can't find enough hours in a day to get everything done, let alone spend time with your wife or your husband or your partner or your kids. You're so busy. You're too busy. I'm too busy. You want to end the madness. You don't want to prolong it. It's counterintuitive, but doing nothing sometimes actually fuels your productivity. Doing something is productivity's gas. When you do stuff, that's the gas that keeps your productivity going. Doing nothing is productivity's brakes. BRAKES, not BREAKS. The brakes, you're putting on the brakes. We need both gas and brakes to function well when we drive a car, don't we? Can't have one without the other. Imagine where you'd be if you had lots of gas and you could pour it on, but you had no brakes to stop, or vice versa. You had brakes to stop, but nothing's moving because you have no gas. So without the pauses of doing nothing, you're only using gas without your brakes. If you were a car, you'd burn out your engine or crash, finally run out of gas. But you don't have to let that happen. And the solution, take time out. Take time out of the daily grind to quiet your mind. Idle moments to meditate. We talked about that when we talked about being awake and being aware that you're awake. Not woke. Woke is a fallacious political thing. It's nothing to do with being woke. It's being awake. Wake up. Be aware of what's going on. We talked about that for a long time. And when you're doing that, you wake up and you find that you will have time to meditate. You make time to meditate, to take a power nap, contemplate. I took a power nap this afternoon. It was more a prolonged power nap. I laid down for, I think I fell asleep for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and I woke up groggy as hell. And but I had to go somewhere. I had a meeting to go to. So doing nothing provides a period for important decisions to incubate in your mind It cultivates clarity. It cultivates creativity to put your career goals and maybe even make them a reality. So take time to slow things down. Dolce far niente. Dolce far niente. The Italians have a name for it. Dolce far niente. The sweetness of doing nothing. Dolce far niente. And all that matters is living in the moment, watching time go by. It doesn't translate in the United States very well, where tasks and schedules define us. Our successes define us. The closest translation we have is killing time to dolce far niente. Killing time. But dolce far niente demands more, to intentionally let go and prioritize being alongside doing. Meaning doing's over here, and you're kind of alongside it. You're existing here instead of here. And doing nothing's been compared to the pauses that are integral to a beautiful piece of music. Without the absences of sound, the music would just be noise. And one day, I watched a guy, his arms outstretched from his side, balance on an old seawall. In that moment, with all the time in the world, no hurry to get anywhere. All he cared about was navigating his body against the warm ocean breeze. Now, unbeknownst to him, his dolce far niente provided breaks that would recharge his productivity later on. And so the sweetness of doing nothing gives you moments to chill, live in the present, be aware and awake of who you are and where you are. Clear out the things that have to be done for a minute. Savor your life to the fullest. Putting on the brakes and stepping away refills your dwindling reservoir. It replenishes your mojo, if you will. It provides an incubation period for embryonic ideas to hatch in your mind. And in those moments it might seem empty and needless, strategies, solutions that have been there all along in some embryonic form are giving space to come alive. And so you're finding, in a sense, your sweet spot. You find your sweet spot. And don't take that to the wrong places. Every time you get caught in the stress of the moment, step back, take a breath, chill in that sweet spot. And achieving balance between the gas, the doing, and the brakes, the being, is a never-ending dance. Now, some might look at this and think, oh, that sounds like the philosophy of the lazy. It's not. It's the philosophy of the very productive, and sometimes the overproductive, who say, you need to put on the brakes, you need to slow it down. Especially in our culture where doing more is valued than being. Doing is more valued than being. Have you noticed that? And the adage, an idle mind is the devil's workshop, blinks in your brain like a neon sign telling you where you're taught to believe that the more you do, the greater your worth. And if you're like most people, you're going to continue to struggle to find that sweet spot, the middle way between doing something and doing nothing. And so that's for you, Sam. Oh, you don't? Okay. I threw these at him. Headset. So stress is going to continue to track you down. Some people, including yourself, your own drive, your own motivations, things that make you go, will make unreasonable demands of you. Whether Mercury's in retrograde or not, life won't always go your way. Hardships and obstacles are going to occur. Family obligations will continue to be a challenge. And at times it might even seem like the world's conspiring against you, throwing all the wrenches in your gears that it can. But it isn't. You're simply experiencing life on its own terms and then yours. Make a to-be list to offset your to-do list. What if you made a to-be list alongside your to-do list? What would you put on it? What would you guys put on your to-be list? Hey, Corin Browning, good to see you. Nice to have you here. Miss you being around often, and so I'm glad you made it in. Excuse me. What'd you put on your to-be list? Meditating a minimum of 5 whole long minutes a day. That's at the top of my list. Not always good at it, but sitting and just meditating and clearing things out for a few minutes. I like to be outdoors when it's nice outside. I like to go sit in the outdoors. And sometimes, I got to be frank with you, I get pretty antsy when I'm not doing anything. So to do nothing, I sometimes have to force myself to do nothing. So if you were to start your list now, you might jot down elbow room to stretch. Go outside. Do you know what it's like to go outside when you don't have to have the sounds of the city around you and just hear the sounds of nature? The wind going through the trees, birds singing, insects in the bushes, frogs croaking in the swamp. And Sam, what did you bring up? Just peacefulness. Have you ever done that? I just saw somebody shared an old memory of mine, and that old memory was I had put up William Butler Yeats' poem, The Lake Isle of Innisfree. It says, I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there in a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping on the veils of morning to where the linnet sings. I'm stumbling on some of the words. The last verse is, I will arise and go now for always night and day. I hear lake water lapping in low sounds by the shore. I hear it on the roadways and on the pavements gray. I hear it in the deep heart's core. When's the last time you visited your own personal Lake Isle of Innisfree, whatever that might be? And I shall find some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow. Jot down elbow room to stretch, jot down deep breathe between appointments, or time to walk around the block and clear your head, or meditate, pray, practice chair yoga at your desk, watch the grass grow, or just contemplate the universe. I remember when Sam's older sisters, my twin daughters, who I talk about a lot on this show, Abby and Bryn, what led up to the divorce between their mom and I was there was a period where she had checked herself into alcoholics treatment, much to her credit. But I remember she came down one morning as I was dressed and ready to go to work at the ad agency in the city. This is when we had the horse ranch. Excuse me. And just to make the mental picture, yeah, she was a good-looking woman, short blonde hair, and she was sticking up all over, and shoulder length, I should say, and she was wearing this You know, the mid-thigh type of short robe that women wear, satin silk robe with flowers, and it was tied shut. She came down and she was being really nasty. She'd been drunk the night before. And I stood there in the middle of the dining room while she's going off about something. I don't even remember the topic. And I said, she got quiet and I said, "Are you done?" And she said, "Yes." And yeah, I'm done. And I said, "If you look over on the table there, there's a short stack of white paper." I said, "That is I'm filing for divorce." Now, mind you, she and I had been to this table 2 other times. She had filed divorce. And I said, "I'm filing divorce." I said, "I can't live this way anymore with the drunkenness all the time and the et cetera." And I said, "So I want you to look that over. I'd like to have you just sign that and we'll move forward." And and she immediately felt the gravity of the situation. I said, "Look, you don't have to hit the bricks today." I said, "But I think you need to start finding a place to live. And I need you out of the house and away from me and away from Abby and Bryn were our only 2 kids at the time. They were 7 at the time. They're 29 now. And so she started started to cry, and she fell down on the floor in front of my feet in weeping, and she put her arms around my knees and she said, "Please don't do this. I'll change. I'll be better. Please don't do this." And I said, I said, "Show me. Show me. I have to go to work. There's the paperwork." Well, I got a call at work later that morning in the city, and the pastor's wife had called me and said she was driving Annette to treatment. Oh, I bring that up because as a setting for the story, my daughters were a little heartbroken about it all. At 7 years old. I remember Abby looked at me and she started to cry. And she said, "Oh no, we're going to be one of those divorced families, aren't we?" And so I made the best that I could with them. I had to go to work in the mornings, and I was just telling Sam about this very story this morning. That's why it's fresh in my mind. And it comes off of the phrase where I just said, "You watch the grass grow or just contemplate the universe." And this came to mind. So I spent all my waking hours with the girls when I wasn't at work. We would get up at 6 in the morning to get ready for school. The school bus would come at 8. What do you think we did for that 2 hours? We did stuff. We talked. We told stories. I made breakfast every morning. We had eggs or omelets or pancakes or waffles or whatever, French toast. We made all kinds of breakfasty stuff. And we had breakfast and we continued that tradition up until they were in later high school days and they had to run off before eating anything. And so that's where we had some together time. And then they would take the bus home in the afternoon and get off at one of the farms where the mom would watch them. And I glitched out for a moment there. She had kids that would work with the kids, play with the kids. And Steve, we had 40 acres at that time. And so I would pick them up after work, right around 5:30, quarter to 6. And then we'd go home. And so we'd hang out all evening. I didn't go out anywhere. Of course, we were out on the ranch. We were out in the country. We had horses out there. So we had a beautiful place to go. We'd go for walks on the property, out into the woods, down the hills, the old creek bed and stuff. And one night, I said to the girls, we're standing in the kitchen or the living room, and I said, "Hey, go get every blanket and every pillow in the house and drag it downstairs here. Why? What are we doing? They'd ask. I said, just go do it. I'll tell you in a minute. And I said, it's going to be a surprise. And they're giggling. And they ran upstairs. They pulled every blanket out of every bed upstairs. They pulled every pillow, dragged them all downstairs in a couple of different trips. All the pillows off the sofa. And we had this big stack of about 12 blankets and a bunch of pillows, more than that. And we dragged them outside. And I said, now, you two take a corner, I'll take this corner. Let's spread them out. And we started spreading out the blankets one on top of each other. We made a big pad of blankets. And then I threw back the top two layers. And I put all the pillows down. We arranged the pillows. And it's okay, everybody lay down on the blankets. Leave room for me in the middle. And we had a big barnyard light that illuminated the whole barnyard there and the front yard of the house for nighttime. Then I had to go pull the fuse box. Pulled the big fuse out. The light went. And it became pitch black. And so we laid there, and the stars were unbelievable that night. You couldn't see, almost not make out the constellations. The stars were so bright. And I said to them, look at that. And they laid there, oh, wow. You could see the Milky Way. You could see, I don't know what constellations we made out that night. It was autumn night, I think. And so it wasn't cold, but it was crisp. And I said to the girls, I said, now, we're all laying on the pillows looking at the stars. And I said, you know, every time you're just quiet and stare at the night sky, something amazing will happen. Really? They said, I said, yeah. I said, so just watch the sky for a minute. Not 2 minutes later, 2 shooting stars shot across the sky. And they erupted with joyful giddiness and laughter. I said, there you go. I said, God sent a star for each one of you. So something amazing happened in the sky tonight. And so this is what came to my mind when I said, you take a moment to watch the grass grow. Watch the stars. Have you watched this night sky long enough, any of you, to see something amazing happen? That's what we did that night. So give yourself 5 minutes. The more you practice stilling your mind and centering on the quiet places within you, the more you can access a calm state, even in times of upheaval. Do you think Abby and Brent and I were not in times of upheaval that night? Now, we did it together that night, watching the sky, but we did it in the quiet. We turned everything else in life off. Another way we did that once was catching the bat flying around the house, laughing with these 2 little girls, running around the house trying to catch a bat that was flying all around. And I'll tell you that one another time. So, when you're peaceful and centered, your heart, your respiratory rates slow down, muscles loosen, your mind is open, it's clear, actions are reflective and balanced, and you're much more productive. Just 5 minutes of sweet nothings. You're mindfully present in each moment, or your busy life coexists with idle moments without imperatives. Nothing to rush you, nothing to fix or accomplish. And after applying the brakes and doing something for nothing, you're ready to go again. And watch your resilience and your creativity and your productivity absolutely soar through the ceiling. So, folks, The effort to drive the other person crazy, a review of the psychoanalytic work on how we do to each other. We didn't even hit tonight. We didn't get there. Sorry for the false, misleading title tonight. But I thought this was kind of good to dwell on. And at that, guess what? We're out of time. We're actually over time. So I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to ask you, if you are not a member of this channel, click on the little join button down below. I think it's over here somewhere. The little join button down below. It's going to take you to a link. It'll just pop up over this, so you can do it while we're talking. And it'll give you 3 memberships that you can join. $2 a month, $5 a month, $15 a month. And you'll see what you're supposed to get with those. And many of you are members, and I want to thank you for that. And if you're not a member, go ahead and sign up. That helps us out on this end, and it gives you something that's worth it to you. So I want to thank you in advance. All right, that's it. That's all we got. We're going to be back take about a 23-hour break. We'll be back tomorrow night. We're going to talk about the effort we all put into driving other people crazy. And I think it's part of my scratchy throat tonight. Boy, I'm just scratchy tonight. And I'm talking for an hour without a drink of water. And so I'm scratchier yet. So there you go, folks. That's tonight's show. It's all the time we got. Thank you, Sam. Yeah, it's nice to have my son around. Hang on. Oh, that's better. So be here tomorrow night, same time, for Tuesday night show. And I want to thank you for being here. Everybody, thanks for giving me your time. You don't know how much I appreciate it. And as always, live long and prosper.